The story I'm sharing isn't a new one. It's happened since the dawn of man. Joan of Arc, Reuben Carter, Japanese-American internment, Salem witch trials, To Kill a Mockingbird. It's a story of injustice. Now I know, injustice gets thrown around a lot lately. The lady at Starbucks didn't make my half-calf lavender agave latte correctly. The injustice. Or even slight injustices, like getting charged too much for those jeggings you thought were on sale. Injustice has lost its meaning in our culture, and that's why stories are so much better at conveying the magnitude of injustice. Over the last 30 years, 3,286 people have been wrongfully convicted and their cases overturned, with nearly 30,000 years stolen from innocent men and women. That's nearly as long as civilization has been around. We're talking the Neolithic period here. Stone tools and fire, all of human history, from a small marginalized group of people. And that's injustice. So let me tell you about Troy. Troy had a rough upbringing, but when he was 18, he found solace in the Air Force. It gave him purpose and structure to his chaotic life. And he thrived in the Air Force. Top of his class, a natural-born leader. And a few years into service, he caught a missile that wasn't secured properly and blew 3 discs in his back, forcing him to medically retire. Troy didn't waste any time applying the lessons he learned in the military to the private sector as an auto parts store manager. Everything was going well. He had a good job, he had 2 kids, a wife. Life was good. But then he got picked up by the police as a prime suspect in a child abuse case. Now, they had no evidence that it was him that molested the little girl, but they were dead set that he was the guy. His trial was set 7 different times over the course of 9 months, all the while repeatedly saying he didn't do it and that they should find the guy that did. And right before each court date, the prosecutors would offer a plea bargain, and Troy would refuse each time because he was innocent. What the prosecutors were doing was slowly breaking down Troy's willpower to resist the outcome that they wanted. And before we go any further, I think it's helpful to understand what a plea bargain is, because a lot of people don't know. A plea bargain is an agreement between a defendant, the person accused of the crime, and the prosecutor, the lawyer representing the government. And in that agreement, the defendant agrees to plead guilty to a lesser charge or a reduced sentence for a concession from the prosecutor. So it's like this. If a defendant is charged with a serious crime like murder, they may plead guilty to a lesser charge like manslaughter. In exchange, the prosecutors offer a lighter sentence. In this way, it saves time and money for the court and allows the accused to take responsibility for their actions, if there are any. So get this, 95% of all criminal cases are settled through plea bargains. And a study recently came out that tells us that 98% of all federal cases are settled through pleas. Although useful, plea bargains have a dark side, particularly where defendants are coerced or pressured into pleading guilty, or where defendants aren't fully informed of their rights or the consequences of the plea. I think John Oliver touched on it pretty well in his episode on prosecuting.
So why do innocent people plead guilty? Well, prosecutors will often offer a deal while threatening that if you go to trial, they will stack charges against you and pursue a much harsher sentence. It's something commonly referred to as a trial penalty. Just listen to Rodney Roberts. He was accused of a sexual assault that DNA evidence later proved he did not commit. And I'll let him explain why he took a deal.
When I finally got to the court, this attorney, he came in and told me that the prosecutor office had a plea agreement for me. I'm like, plea agreement? I didn't even do it. You know, I pled not guilty. I'm innocent. He was like this urgent. He was this pressure. And he was like, if you don't take this deal, they only offer you 2 years. You'll be home in 2 years. And if not, you know, they're gonna take it off the trial and the judge is ready to give you life sentence if you get found guilty. And I think you're gonna get found guilty. And this is my attorney telling me, this is the one person I had was there to help me. So I thought that to get home to my son, then my family, and to salvage my life, that the best thing I could do for myself was to plead guilty and fight it once I got home.
And as crazy as it sounds to hear that, it kind of makes sense. 2 years in prison is terrible, but a life sentence is absolutely terrifying.
Troy took the 7th plea offer, even though he didn't do it, because his attorney said that they would lose if they went to court. And if they lost, he'd spend 99 years to life in prison. And the plea they offered was 120 days in jail and 10 years probation. Of course he took it. Police happen behind closed doors, which means that there's a lot of pressure that we don't know about. But we do know that there's often very little time that people give, like 30 minutes before trial, for you to make a life decision. Anybody could buckle under that kind of pressure. You see, in Williamson County, where Troy's case took place, there is no legislation that says prosecutors can't hide evidence of someone's innocence and secure a guilty plea. And in Troy's case, that's just what they did. But here's the crazy thing. We found that there's no legislation in half of the US. So what happened to Troy happened to all of these people. And it could happen to you, it could happen to me, it could happen to our kids. And this list is just those that have been exonerated. There are certainly thousands more still in prison or on probation for something they didn't do. But the largest contributing factor of most exonerations are false accusations, official misconduct, and hiding evidence of innocence. I know what you're thinking. Why would anybody hide evidence of someone's innocence? Well, let's ask the supreme leader of hiding evidence himself, Ken Anderson. Ken is the only DA in history to be disbarred for withholding evidence. Ken said, "I don't believe in the release of such evidence if it may result in freeing an individual that I believe is guilty." One man in Anderson's county was wrongfully convicted and spent 25 years in prison. Ken, by the way, spent 3 days in prison, got out on bail, and fled the country. You feeling me on this injustice piece yet? Ken Anderson was the DA in Troy's case as well. And they hid evidence that he was innocent the whole time, but they still wanted to keep that 100% conviction rate. 100%! So they used pleas. The injustice doesn't stop with time served. The stigma that follows a felon affects their family and their ability to make a living. I would know. Troy's my dad. And I lived with the repercussions of this atrocity. We were kicked out of churches. We lived below the poverty level. We had our house picketed until we left town. My father was physically assaulted, badmouthed, maligned. We had all the hatred of most of society on us. Only a few people cared. And Lucian Dervin, a professor of law in Nashville, says that this isn't just having an effect on those individuals, but it's having an effect on an entire community and the safety of an entire community. And I can attest to that. So that's where this documentary comes in. I'm making this doc to help shed some light on the shadows of pleas and the stories of those that have been swallowed up by that shadow. We're all about sharing these stories in the most respectful and professional way. And we could make this a scrappy, low-budget film, but we feel like these stories, these people, they deserve so much more than scrappy. They deserve our best, because life has given them its worst. And we've already been met with incredible generosity through multiple donors. It's incredible. And now we're opening this up to a more broad network to allow others to support the work we're doing in bringing light to the shadows. We want as many people to see this as possible. We need a movement to bring change in our country's laws. And that only happens with more eyes. We're a crew that cares about humanity and earnestly hope for the freedom and justice for all that we were promised. We'd love for you to become a champion for this as well. No amount of money is too little. And we want you to share in the joy that we have in bringing change and hearing stories of the forgotten. The documentary is just the first step. We want to see a world that is better for our kids. Not just mine, but everyone's. And that's why we opened it up to the public instead of only going to private donors. Because that kind of movement, that kind of community that really believes that this should change for America, that's what we want. If you'd like to learn more about us, this community, this movement, there's links below to our podcast where we'll have the wrongfully convicted and experts in criminal justice on. There's also a link to our newsletter where we'll share updates on the film and kind of what's happening. We would love for you to start the journey with us and be a part of that. Until next time, be well, do good work, stay disciplined.